I have this crazy idea to speak instead of write. I think I can get more accomplished speaking. When I write, I can paint when I write. It's fun to write. I don't know if I'll be as good a speaker as I am a writer, but we will see. I wrote a joke yesterday. First joke I've ever written. It took me an hour and a half to make it, but I think it's sort of funny. It's a challenge to write comedy. To write a joke, make up a joke, is not real easy. It took me an hour and a half, and I don't know how good the joke is, so I'm going to read it to you. I wrote a few jokes about schizophrenics. I actually went schizophrenic from being gaslighted for 5 years, and I counseled myself. I locked myself in my bathroom, turned the radio way up because I thought I was bugged, and I counseled myself. I talked to myself as like a counselor and tried to fix myself. I thought if I'm going to be schizophrenic, I'm going to do it that way. It worked. And it brought to mind a one-man play where the man comes on as a schizophrenic and he becomes his own doctor. And at the end of the play, he bows as one. He's not schizophrenic anymore because he fixed himself. That would be a great one-man play. But anyway, in the jokes. Question, what did the one schizophrenic say to the other schizophrenic? 2 heads are better than one. Why did the schizophrenic lock the door to the bathroom? He was trying to get away from himself. Did you hear the one about the schizophrenic who only ever whispered to himself in German? He didn't want the pink elephant in the room to know that he was a Jewish schizophrenic. That's a little hairy there, that one. This is the joke that took me an hour and a half. And when I read it, I get a kick out of it, but I'll see what people think, I guess. A rabbi, a Jewish cowboy, and a Yiddish shoe salesman walk into a bar at buy 2 drinks, get the third drink half price happy hour. The rabbi says to the cowboy, "Where did you get those oh so nice cowboy boots?" Before the cowboy can answer him, the Yiddish shoe salesman says, "Away, we're having a sale down at my shoe store on cowboy boots. When you buy 1 boot, you get the third one for half price." The cowboy turns to the shoe salesman and says, "What about the second boot?" Before the shoe salesman can answer, the rabbi says to the bartender, "Give me a gin and tonic, give the shoe salesman whatever he wants, and charge the cowboy 50% off his drink." The shoe salesman answers the cowboy, "Well, the second boot is full price too, but you have to buy that boot from the other shoe salesman at my store." Before the cowboy can respond, the rabbi slaps the cowboy in the back and says, "So this isn't the only place where you can buy 2 Jews and get the third Jew for half price." All 3 men laugh as the shoe salesman looks at the bartender and whispers to himself, "Maybe I'll have a pink elephant," in German. I don't know what kind of joke that is, but it is what I came up with. I just freestyled it. But since I'm on the subject of freestyle, I gave my gifts to God when I was young, and I said, "God, show me problems to fix with my gifts, and I'll try to fix what you show me." And he took me up on it, because I was 22 and I was in the OR at University of Penn as a laser video technician, and I rubbed elbows with a lot of Ivy Leaguers, very bright men. Surgeons are very bright, and they're cultured, Ivy League. So I became cultured working there. But then I was taken to another hospital as part of a deal, and I saw some things that weren't too great. I mean, doctors were awesome. They fix you up. But the politics of healthcare, that's what I studied more or less, how everything works together. What is the driving force? So I was there for the patient and God. And I thought, wow, I'm very creative, and I'm helping doctors teach doctors how to fix patients. That's a good thing. My mother said, "Don't show them all you have." Well, I gave them 110%. And I did this with ADHD, severe ADHD, undiagnosed. So my brain was more or less going in reverse from what I've learned about ADHD. So now on Ritalin medication, I was diagnosed when I was 46, I'm 55. My brain goes forward. thinking forward. So, in your car, you have 5 gears going forward, you have 1 gear going reverse. So my brain can fly, I believe. And I've diagnosed myself as a genius savant because I'm different than people. One girl I went out with told me, Michael, you're different than people that are different, which I thought was a pretty profound compliment. Unique. But I speak facts. I'm not opinionated. I speak facts, what I find out about situations, about things. And I just try to make them better for people. I love people. I was brought up in church. And God loved the world. This must be a good thing. So I love the world. I actually prayed for the devil one day. Said, God, the devil has a pretty crappy job. You give him a day off or something? And pray to the devil, but pray to God for the devil. I don't know if too many people have done that and meant it sincerely. So maybe a little eccentric also. But the reason I'm speaking is I saw a little dog dressed up like a bee in a little bee outfit. And a black girl with a sparkling personality was holding the little dog up in the middle of a cornfield. It was a picture on Instagram, and it had 285,000 likes. And I'm thinking to myself, I call myself God's worker bee, because it keeps me humble. When I met Taylor Swift incognito, I didn't know who she was. I thought she was a plain girl. I fell in love with her, not knowing who she was. So it blew my mind to find out she was Taylor Swift. Yeah, the way I found out is the doctor I went to in his office, he had a WebMD magazine, and the girl was Taylor Swift on the cover, and it said Taylor's Time, and she's wearing a little diamond ring, and it just grabbed me. It felt the same way it felt when I looked at the girl at the Jubilee thrift store in Lebanon. It stopped me. I lifted the magazine, and I usually don't do things like that, but I lifted it. And as I looked at it, I was very good with the computer and Photoshop. I took her makeup off and darkened the hair a little bit, and it looked like the same girl. I told two people. I told a guy at a pawn shop, worked at a pawn shop, and I told my mother, and they both laughed at me. But it sure got around quickly. The next day, everyone was dressed up. And that was when gaslighting started. I think she may have liked me. I'm a poet. I write poems. So I wrote this. She was young, so I wrote her a poem, and I misspelled. It was about she has two hearts and I have none, because she just took my heart when I saw her. And I had a little brain collapse there. I wrote the word surly instead of surely. I left out an E. And I was just going to write her one poem because I was 46 and she looked about 20. And that's a huge gap. So I was going to write her one poem and be done. But I misspelled surely. So I wrote another poem and fixed the other poem. And I believe I wrote a poem called Ringtones. And it was just about, it doesn't matter what the ring is made of. It could be made of brass, wood, stone, cardboard. It's the love that is the treasure. And ringtones is like a phone thing, but with ADHD, I double entendre a lot. I say something that means three things, and I work it somehow. Very literal. I take things literally because of my ADHD. So I wrote this poem called Ringtones. And I think it came from an Alan Jackson song, Golden Ring. I played that over and over, and I wrote a poem just to see what would come out of me. And she danced. I gave it to her, she read it, and she got giddy. And she danced. She's like a happy dance. Well, it freaked me out. I had untreated ADHD at the time. It gave me a lot of anxiety. So I kind of snuck away backwards. I looked at her as I backed away. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Most beautiful. It was beautiful. And I had already fallen in love with her. It was love at first sight. I was there with my cousin. And she said, Michael, did you see the way that girl looked at you? And I'm walking around singing Heartaches by the Numbers, butchering the words up. And I looked up and there she was, smiling at me like the sun, and that was it. I know it was love. I didn't even check out her boobs. That usually as a guy you do that, right? I couldn't remember. Her smile just froze me. So anyway, I snuck away because that gave me anxiety. I thought she was going to fall over her or stuff. I didn't know what to do. And people were acting strange, other workers there. One lady was counting pennies one day when I went there. And she looked at me and all smirky and said, I hate to count pennies. It was just a thrift store. Pennies out of dollars. It just, I flagged it. It didn't make sense. And that fits in with the Taylor Swift thing, that they would act like something like that if they knew something was going on. I believe she wanted to find someone that liked her just for being her, not Taylor Swift. And she did. But after she did the happy dance, I went back the next week, and I caught a glimpse of her. She was downstairs, and she looked like shit. I mean, it's like she didn't sleep. She looked like she didn't sleep. I didn't know what to do. And there was a man there, big man, about 60, 65, late 60s, but built like a bull. And as I went up to see her to see if she was upstairs, I said, you must put the light behind you, brother, so you can read better. And he struck up a conversation with me. Then I explained that I'm here, I like to admire the girl up there, I write poems. I said, she's young, so I just visit her. And she wasn't upstairs that day. I had written a poem on greed. I wrote a poem on each of the 7 deadly sins. That's how I discovered the 7 deadly sin thing. I wrote a poem on each one. And I thought it's easier just to teach that instead of writing a poem. But the poems are amusing. A greed poem, I wrote a jealousy poem and a wrath poem. But I read them to my mother and my sister, and it juiced them up. Like I saw a change in them. I went down and after a little while, whatever, after I read a few of them, left them down there for them to read. They had sunglasses on. They took their sunglasses off, and their eyes were as big as quarters. I mean, they were all but manic. They were juiced. And I believe it came from the poems. And that's how I figured out you get a better flow if you stay away from the 7 deadly sins. When you feel the 7 deadly sin, one of them, the devil makes a meat puppet out of you. He can control you. Anger is the easiest one to explain. When you're angry, you do dumb things. Out of character. Out of anger. That is when the devil has his hand up your butt, making you a meat puppet. That is how he plays on the earth, through people. That's what I believe. He is not here in person, but he's here. If someone is greedy, they're a meat puppet. And unlike anger, you're not angry the next day. You're still greedy the next day. Once you're greedy one day, you're greedy the next day. I think you're constantly greedy, so that more or less means you're constantly a meat puppet. And pride is also constant. And that's pretty bad. But anyway, back to the Taylor Swift thing. The man stopped me on the way out also. He went to the other exit. And he struck up a conversation again. So I said, the girl that I was here to see at Admire, I said, was not here. Although I did see her, but she looked like crap. Looks like she didn't sleep. I thought I broke her or something. I don't know. But anxiety. I still have untreated ADHD. And what I was doing, I was using her to focus. Like, love focused me. And she was a giant muse for me. I was writing 400-word poems in 10 minutes. I wrote 30 poems in a month. And I wrote 4 poems in one day. It's just she juiced me up. And the things are pretty incredible that I wrote. I wrote a poem, Alone with Him. I would have to read them to you. They all got pretty good. But I found out she was Taylor Swift in this magazine. And all of a sudden it got around, and I think I was on the money. And what happened is other boys that she met, other guys, for some reason, all committed suicide. I don't know if all of them, but there was enough that committed suicide that they had a vigil for them. Now, in the meanwhile, time she figured out what happened, that the bird was out, the cat was out of the bag. She left town. My town's not a great town. My aunt used to call it the asshole of the world. Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I don't know if it's the asshole of the world, but that's what my aunt thought. She was a psychic. She's a pretty smart lady. So it became bedlam in my town. People came from out of town. There were a lot of good-looking young guys, young bucks. Cars swerved at me. I mean, somehow word got out, and I can sing. So I sang on YouTube, and I had been practicing for a while. That was my gig, singing and writing screenplay. I went to screenplay school at University of Penn. Very visual. And I'm just a natural screenplay. I love stories, and I figured I have like 20 stories that I wrote synopsis for like 15 years ago. And they just came from nowhere. All of a sudden they popped in my head. I thought I was this brilliant screenwriter, and then I figured out that they came from God. Like, they're definitely God's stories. I was sitting in the bathroom floor one day, and I thought the word resume would make a nice name for a French maid. Resume. And from that, a whole story popped in my head called Parlez-vous français? Do you speak French? I'm rambling on, but bear with me. The movie starts out at an airport. And there's a younger man there waiting for his mother and his father to come home for Christmas. They had recently gotten divorced. They were coming on separate planes, and he was there to meet both of them and take them back to his house for Christmas. Well, when you cut to the plane, here the man is with this French maid, Resume, and it's his girl. And he's an older man, and she's younger, so he's reliving his youth or something. Like, he's a very young girlfriend. She's beautiful, Resume. And when they get off the plane, she has to go to the bathroom. So she goes to the bathroom, splits up with him, and the son is still waiting for both his mom and dad. But his dad is walking up behind him, and he doesn't know that his dad's walking up behind him, and Resume comes out of the bathroom, and she sees his dad behind him. She doesn't know him yet. She hasn't been introduced. And she just speaks French. She's all French. And she smiles at the father, like a beautiful, beautiful smile. And it's close enough where the son thinks she's smiling at him, and he falls in love with her, for love at first sight. He just is taken with her, only to find out that it's his dad's girlfriend, and he fell in love with her at first sight. When the mother finds this out, she's not too impressed with his young girlfriend. Like, she thinks he's trying to relive his childhood or something. She's not too impressed with it. It would make a great Doris Day Rock Hudson flick, like those good old movies. Parlez-vous français? She would be subtitled. She would speak French, and she would have subtitles. That's more or less as far as I got with that story. But from that, I could make a whole story. If I just sit down and it comes out of me. I don't question it. It just happens. Like the joke. It took an hour and a half, but I made it make some kind of sense. Well, I've been speaking for 20 minutes. Back to the Taylor Swift thing. I mean, my town got real crazy. Some people came that were here for a fight. It started just like a competition. Everyone was singing karaoke. It was bedlam. I'm glad she left, because she didn't need to see stuff like that. But, of course, swerved at me, young bucks. I don't know if they knew me. I don't know So if good-looking guys were a target, it turned into like a competition thing. It was a crazy time. And I was singing on YouTube. And these boys that she met committed suicide. Now, the doctor I was going to wasn't too nice. And he said it accusingly. Are you saying things to boys to make them commit suicide? And it blew my mind because my two best friends committed suicide in Philadelphia. So suicide's a sore subject with me. And that's when I made a promise to God. I said, God, if you get me through this suicide, because it hit me pretty hard, I said, I promise I will never commit suicide. I'll never take myself out no matter what. So that's one of the reasons I think I'm still here, because I made a promise to God. And if I would have broken that promise and committed suicide, the first thing on my judgment day, I would have had to say, I'm sorry I broke my promise, which isn't too cool. So I believe that might have kept me alive. And working in Philadelphia, the doctors conditioned me. I mean, they pushed me. They pushed me straight up a mountain, like especially the one guy. But I could do it. And I did it. And I thanked him at the end. When I was laid off, I said, you pushed me up a mountain, I said, and now I can enjoy the view for myself. I said, so thank you. Which was a nice thing to say, I feel. But that conditioned me. When I was finished there, I had post-traumatic stress. Probably because of the ADHD. I had a hard time sitting. I have to sit in front of my computer for hours and hours to get their work done when they had seminar. Because they would give me their stuff late, some of them. And a lot of material. And I'm a perfectionist, so I wouldn't let it go unless it was perfect. But if I wasn't conditioned by them, I may not have made it through this Taylor Swift thing either. But anyway, everyone got mean to me. My family deserted me. Everyone started gaslighting me. No one, if I would talk about Taylor Swift, my family would just turn around and walk away and ignore me. End of conversation, done. I didn't quite get it. I didn't understand it. Until a doctor at the VA, I was told by a Marine, they said, Michael, if you really need help, go to the VA. So I went to the VA. They fed me, and the doctor actually looked at me and said, yes, Michael, it was Taylor Swift. And that gave me a blade of grass to hang on, because no one else verified it for me. And that blade of grass came in handy. Gaslighting's no joke. It really messes you up. You don't see it. I mean, I was actually afraid to say the name Taylor Swift because it made people act weird. At first, they would badmouth her, and it broke my heart. I mean, it messed me up. So I started acting like I didn't understand. Like, what are you talking about Taylor Swift for? I can act stupid. And they bought it. So then the game became keep away from Michael, which was easier than hearing her badmouth. Because I fell in love with her. She was Taylor Swift. What am I going to do? I mean, how am I ever going to see her again? I broke character once when a guy told me what he would like to do to her sexually. And I looked at him and I said, do you think you could even talk to her like that? I said, she smiles like the sun. The guy looked at his shoes and he said, no. That's the only time I let on that I knew it was Taylor Swift after a certain point. I'm thinking the boys committed suicide because they were gaslit also. If they said that they met Taylor Swift, they were mistreated also. It's like nobody wants anything good for you in this country. I don't know if it's the American dream, but I fell in love with what I thought was a plain girl, and people took it from me. I was given anhedonia, which is the fear of happiness, by 5 local doctors. They would drop me after 7 months. They also gaslit me. If I would bring up Taylor Swift, they would change the subject or just not acknowledge me. Which I'm paying for this treatment, you know. And that falls in line with what I think of healthcare. What I found out in Philadelphia. There's a lot of greed in healthcare. CEO of a company, hospital company we'll call it, First day, I'm the video tech. Producing videos for the surgeons, surgical videos and seminars. He told me, he said, it's all about money and prestige to these gentlemen. Money and prestige. That's greed and pride. That's two of the 7 deadly sins. They're all meat puppets. And there's a lot of greed and prestige, money and prestige in healthcare because it's a business. They were like academic teachers. They were called the big guns by a shrink I saw down in Philadelphia, Nick Tenalia. He said, Michael, these are the big guns. I said, I never worked with any other guns. So I said, I don't know how big they are. I said, they're the only guns I've ever worked with. From University of Penn to Thomas Jefferson University. Well, I don't know, it's a country bumpkin, hillbilly sorta, and they cultured me. So I wrote a poem called The Cultured Hillbilly. So I didn't realize that they ever cultured me, but if you work with Ivy League surgeons for 15 years, they get cultured. Especially the one man, the head chief surgeon. He would have me scan all kinds of art. And with my ADHD, I could almost remember everything I scanned. If I sit and think, I can visualize it. Art, beautiful art, like really classy stuff. They've used them as filler slides in his presentations. But anyway, I became cultured. And from hanging around the surgeons, working with them every day, I started thinking like a surgeon. But anyway, coming back to the Taylor Swift thing. I was in 5 mental institutions in 5 years. I put myself in 2. The one because a car swerved at me and I swerved back and I got closer than they got to me. And my heart didn't race. I didn't get anxiety from it, nothing. I actually smiled and I flagged that. I thought that's not right. So I checked myself in when that happened. And I went to Thomas Jefferson for help twice. The first time I was kicked out. And the second time, they falsified a drug test. And they gave me my drug screen back, and it said that more or less they had this list, Oxycontin, angel dust. And I said, what's this? And they said, well, that's not in you. I said, well, I quit smoking pot. I said, that's not in me. I said, my medication's not here. So it just seemed fishy. So the first thing I did, came home, and I checked myself in a hospital called Phil Haven. And the first thing they do is take a blood test and analyze your blood. So I counteracted the falsification of the drug screen immediately, same day. And I nailed it because when I left there in 3 days, a nurse named Stu said, oh, by the way, Michael, we didn't find any Oxycontin or angel dust in your system. So he really clued me in. I appreciate what he said to me. But that's what I ran into. I created a paper trail. I go to a good hospital and then a bad hospital. And I created a paper trail. Because they can't look into your forward medical records. They can look back maybe, but they can't look forward. So you can look at the medical records and you can see who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. And it seemed that all the good hospitals had God in their name. Holy Hands, that was a good place. Presbyterian, that was a good place. Anything that had something to do with God was a good hospital. Which I flagged as important. You know what I mean? God gives us the gift of life. The man is charging man money to take care of God's gift. And I believe it has God pissed off. He doesn't like it. And that's why healthcare should be a service and not a business. And if you turn it into a service, you're taking greed out of it, the equation, if it's not a business. Hospitals should not be competing with each other. They should be competing with each other. Meaning they should work together. I have an idea to network all the hospitals together, and through academics, the university hospitals would teach the smaller hospitals, like in the morning, because they teach in the mornings anyway, but it would go live video through G5, and the smaller hospitals could be kept up to date. It's all about patient care. There's a standard that should be there called a gold standard, and it's about patient care. It's not about making money. It's not about a business. It's about taking care of people, maintaining God's gift of life. Now, since there's a lot of prestige and money in healthcare, there are a lot of meat puppets. The devil owns that hill. The war against the devil and God, the devil owns healthcare. He's got a stronghold in healthcare. And when I was pushed down the ozone layer into schizophrenia land, I more or less met God and the devil. I prayed to God and said, please, God, can you adopt me? I have nothing. I have no one. And I don't know if he did or not, but I believe he did. So I consider myself the only adopted son of Christ. I assumed the name Workerbee to keep myself humble. And like I said, I diagnosed myself as a genius savant. And I believe I am a Lord of hosts. I believe God works through me, because some things I do, when I write some things, I can't remember what I wrote the sentence before. But the words just keep coming out of me. And I realize the stories are more likely God's too. Because if I could get to Hollywood and I could write them, they're good, and they would make a lot of money. I really enjoy taking people on journeys, rides through stories. But I know the difference between fact and fiction. So it would make sense to give me movies like Star Wars, because I want to donate all the money to charity and do good stuff with the money. I don't want the money. I saw what money could do to people, and I didn't like it at all. I learned how not to be by watching some of these doctors, these surgeons work. Or not work, but they were excellent surgeons. Act. The way they treated one another. I was a little bee on the wall. And I studied it for 15 years. And I figured out more or less how to do it. How to convert it. The first thing I would do is convert mental health into a service. I learned on a TV show that a third of the population in prisons and jails are mental health patients. And they were either undiagnosed, or that's why they're there, because they had an episode from a mental health condition, say undiagnosed ADHD, and they had an incident that wound them up in jail. I was in jail for a DUI, 2 DUIs or something, and I met people that were very nice. And I would talk to them, I interviewed, and they would explain they got angry and did something, So I more or less realized there are a lot of undiagnosed patients in jail. So if you convert mental health institutions to a service instead of a business first, it's going to free in the future, it'll happen over a little bit of time, it'll free up a third of the jail population. Now, God's all about life, so he doesn't like to see people that really don't deserve to be in jail. That's wasted life. The death penalty, I don't know if he digs the death penalty. That's a whole different subject, but life is precious to God. This is his number one gift. Music, I feel, was given to us to worship God, to praise God with. And we sell music. People sing their music and sell it and make lots of money. But I think the real reason was to worship him with it. So everything he's given us, we turn to money. Talents and whatnot. And money is the devil. Like it was his job to make the world a material world. Sting's song, Living in a Material World, or no, that's Madonna. But Sting has a song about the material world also. That was the devil's job, to make it material. I told a surgeon one day, I said, on the 8th day, the devil sprinkled money over the world, and all the money fell into the world. And he laughed at God, and he said, that's all I have to do. They'll be fighting over that till they blow that rock up. And the doctor said, Michael, can I quote you on that? So it made me realize that's a pretty neat statement. It's pretty profound. It might have been God. I don't know. I say things that I don't know what I'm saying sometimes until after I say it. I think that's enough. I could probably sit here and talk, it seems, for a long, long time. It's been 34 minutes already. So I'm going to upload this and see what happens. This is the equivalent of me writing. So if 285,000 people like a little bee outfit on a little cute little dog in the cornfield, I'm thinking that they are following maybe what I'm writing. And I'm seeing some things like people protesting doctors here and there. I'm seeing some things that are ringing true with things that I'm saying. And before, when I wrote, I was kicked off Twitter twice. And people started not liking me on Facebook. That's how I ended up on Instagram. Okay, 10-4, over and out. My first, it's like a podcast, only it's all black. If you listen to the whole thing, thank you. And I'll get better at it. You can tell I'm a little hyper. Have a good night. And I'll talk to you soon. Buzz, buzz.